I vividly recall the day when I made the decision to hitchhike through the Appalachian region. It was a choice fueled by a thirst for adventure and a deep-seated need to break free from the mundane cycle of daily life. The monotony of everyday routines had become suffocating, and I longed for something more, something that would reignite the spark within me. As someone who loves to travel, I've always been captivated by the untamed beauty of the mountains. The allure of exploring hidden trails and forgotten paths that weave through the rugged terrain was irresistible. The mountains promised freedom and discovery, a chance to lose myself in their vastness and find something new within myself. However, what I encountered on that fateful night shattered my understanding of reality and left me questioning my own sanity. It was an experience that would haunt me for years to come, a reminder of the thin line between the known and the unknown. The journey began like any other. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow over the rolling hills as I made my way along a quiet country road. The air was crisp and fresh, filled with the earthy scent of pine and soil. I felt a profound sense of peace, almost as if I were stepping into a world untouched by the passage of time. It was a moment of tranquility, where the worries of everyday life seemed to fade away, leaving me with nothing but the present moment to savor. The mountains stood majestically in the distance, their peaks silhouetted against the vibrant sky, promising adventure and mystery. Each step I took felt like a step closer to a deeper understanding of myself and the world around me. As darkness descended, I found myself alone on the road, the only sound being the crunch of gravel beneath my boots. I was miles away from the nearest town, with nothing but the stars to guide me. The isolation was both exhilarating and unnerving. It was then that I heard it, a series of rapid, heavy footsteps echoing through the night. My heart skipped a beat as I turned to see a tall, long-armed creature sprinting towards me, its silhouette stark against the moonlit sky, a sight that defied explanation. The creature's presence was both surreal and terrifying, a manifestation of my deepest fears. It was as if the very shadows had come to life, intent on consuming me. A surge of panic coursed through me, and I ran, my feet pounding the earth as I fled into the forest. The trees closed in around me, their branches clawing at my clothes as I stumbled through the underbrush. The forest, once a place of solace, now felt like a maze of impending doom. I could hear the creature behind me, its breath ragged and relentless, a constant reminder of the danger that pursued me, urging me to run faster, to find safety. The once familiar woods became a labyrinth of shadows, each turn leading me deeper into uncertainty. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent shivers down my spine, as if the forest itself were conspiring against me. Desperation drove me deeper into the woods until I stumbled upon an old hunter's cabin. Its windows were boarded up, and the door was ajar, as if inviting me to seek refuge. I threw myself inside, slamming the door shut behind me. My heart raced as I listened to the creature outside, its footsteps circling the cabin, searching for a way in. The cabin, though offering a temporary sanctuary, felt like a fragile barrier against the unknown terror lurking just beyond its walls, a thin line between safety and peril. The walls seemed to close in on me, amplifying the sound of my own heartbeat. The darkness inside was suffocating, yet it was my only shield against the terror outside. For what felt like hours, I huddled in the darkness, my mind racing with fear and confusion. The creature blocked the doorway, its presence a constant reminder of the danger lurking just beyond the walls. I could sense it waiting, as if anticipating the arrival of something even more terrifying. Each creak of the floorboards, each rustle of the wind outside, heightened my anxiety, making the cabin feel both claustrophobic and exposed, a paradox of safety and vulnerability. The oppressive silence was broken only by the occasional howl of the wind, a haunting melody that played on my nerves. The cabin, once a symbol of hope, now felt like a prison, trapping me with my fears. When I finally awoke, the cabin was empty, the creature gone. I stumbled out into the morning light, my body aching and mind reeling from the night's events. My backpack was missing, lost somewhere in the chaos of my escape. But at that moment, I didn't care. I just wanted to leave the dark, oppressive forest behind. The relief of daylight was overwhelming, yet the shadows of the night lingered in my thoughts, refusing to be banished by the sun, a haunting reminder of the night's ordeal. The sun's rays, though warm and comforting, could not erase the chill that had settled in my bones. Each step away from the cabin was a step towards reclaiming my sense of self, yet the fear clung to me like a shadow. Now, as I recount this story, I do so in the hope of exorcising the nightmares that still haunt me. The Appalachian Woods remain a mystery, a place where the boundaries between reality and the supernatural blur. Though I have left them behind, a part of me will always remain there, haunted by the shadows of that night. The experience has etched itself into my memory, a chilling reminder of the unknown forces that exist just beyond the veil of our understanding, a testament to the mysteries that lurk in the depths of the forest. Each retelling is an attempt to make sense of the inexplicable, to find closure in the face of the unknown. The shadows of that night are a constant presence, whispering of the things that defy logic and reason. The decision to hitchhike through the Appalachian region was not one I took lightly. It was a choice driven by a need for change, a desire to escape the monotony that had settled into my life. The mountains, with their rugged beauty and hidden secrets, called to me. I yearned to lose myself in their majesty, to wander the trails that had been forgotten by time. Yet, I could never have anticipated the terror that awaited me in those dark woods, an unexpected twist in my quest for adventure. The journey, which began as a search for freedom, quickly became a fight for survival. Each step was a reminder of the fragility of life and the unpredictability of fate. As I set out on my journey, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The road stretched out before me, a ribbon of gravel winding through the hills. The air was cool and invigorating, carrying with it the scent of pine needles and rich earth. I walked with a sense of purpose, feeling as though I were stepping into a realm where time stood still, where nature reigned supreme, a world far removed from the hustle and bustle of modern life. The tranquility of the landscape was a stark contrast to the chaos that would soon unfold. Each breath I took was a reminder of the peace I sought, yet it was a peace that would soon be shattered. Nightfall found me alone on the road, the silence broken only by the crunch of gravel beneath my boots. The stars twinkled above, offering little comfort as I realized how far I was from any semblance of civilization. The solitude was both thrilling and unnerving, a reminder of the wildness that surrounded me. It was in this stillness that I first heard the footsteps, a rapid, heavy pounding that echoed through the trees, a sound that shattered the tranquility of the night. The sound was both foreign and familiar, a primal rhythm that resonated with my deepest fears. It was as if the earth itself were alive, warning me of the danger that lay ahead. My heart raced as I turned to see a creature unlike anything I had ever imagined. Tall and long-armed, it moved with a speed and grace that defied logic. Its silhouette was stark against the moonlit sky, a menacing figure that sent a jolt of fear through my body. Instinct took over, and I ran, my feet pounding the earth as I sought refuge in the forest, driven by a primal urge to survive, to escape the clutches of the unknown. The creature's presence was a constant reminder of my vulnerability, a shadow that loomed large in the darkness. Each step was a battle against the fear that threatened to consume me. The trees closed in around me, their branches clawing at my clothes as I stumbled through the undergrowth. The forest, once a place of peace, now felt like a trap, a maze of shadows and hidden dangers. The creature pursued me relentlessly, its breath ragged and close, a constant reminder of the threat that loomed, a shadow that refused to be shaken, a predator in the night. Each step took me deeper into the heart of the wilderness, further from the safety of the familiar. The forest became a living entity, its whispers urging me to keep moving, to find safety where none seemed possible. Desperation drove me deeper into the woods, where I stumbled upon an old hunter's cabin. Its windows were boarded up, and the door stood ajar, a beacon of hope in the darkness. I threw myself inside, slamming the door shut behind me. My heart pounded in my chest as I listened to the creature outside, its footsteps circling the cabin, searching for a way in. The cabin, though a temporary sanctuary, felt fragile against the terror that lurked just beyond its walls, a sanctuary that offered little solace. The thin walls seemed to amplify the sounds of the night, turning every rustle into a potential threat. Inside, the air was thick with fear, each breath a struggle against the panic that threatened to overwhelm me. For what felt like an eternity, I huddled in the darkness, my mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. The creature blocked the doorway, its presence a constant reminder of the danger that awaited. I could sense it lingering, as if anticipating something even more terrifying. Each creak of the floorboards, each rustle of the wind outside, heightened my anxiety, making the cabin feel both claustrophobic and exposed, a place of refuge that offered no peace. The darkness seemed to press in on me, a tangible force that threatened to overwhelm my senses. Each moment stretched into eternity, a never-ending cycle of fear and anticipation. When I finally awoke, the cabin was empty, the creature gone. I stumbled out into the morning light, my body aching and mind reeling from the night's events. My backpack was missing, lost somewhere in the chaos of my escape. But at that moment, I didn't care. I just wanted to leave the dark, oppressive forest behind. The relief of daylight was overwhelming, yet the shadows of the night lingered in my thoughts, refusing to be banished by the sun, a reminder of the night's terrors. The morning light, though bright and warm, could not erase the memories of the fear that had gripped me. Each step away from the cabin was a step towards reclaiming my sense of self, yet the fear clung to me like a shadow. Now, as I recount this story, I do so in the hope of exorcising the nightmares that still haunt me. The Appalachian Woods remain a mystery, a place where the boundaries between reality and the supernatural blur. Though I have left them behind, a part of me will always remain there, haunted by the shadows of that night. The experience has etched itself into my memory, a chilling reminder of the unknown forces that exist just beyond the veil of our understanding, a testament to the mysteries that dwell in the heart of the wilderness. Each retelling is an attempt to find closure, to make peace with the shadows that linger in the corners of my mind. The shadows of that night are a constant presence, whispering of the things that defy logic and reason. When I was 12, my grandmother came to live with us. Her arrival marked the beginning of a new chapter in our family life, one filled with warmth, wisdom, and stories that seemed to bridge the gap between past and present. She was a woman of many stories, and I loved listening to her tales of her childhood. Each story was a tapestry of vivid imagery and emotions, woven together with intricate details that transported me to another time and place. Her stories were vivid, filled with the kind of details that made you feel as though you were right there with her, experiencing everything firsthand. Her voice had a way of painting pictures in my mind, each word a brushstroke that brought her past to life. Every evening, after dinner, she would settle into her favorite armchair, and I would sit on the floor by her feet, eager to hear another story. The flickering light from the fireplace would cast dancing shadows on the walls, creating an atmosphere that felt almost magical. The warmth of the fire, combined with the soothing cadence of her voice, created a cocoon of comfort and wonder. One Saturday, curiosity got the better of me, and I asked her what the scariest thing she had ever experienced was. She hesitated for a moment, her eyes clouding over with memories, before she began to recount a story from when she was 14 and worked at an abbey. The abbey was an old, imposing structure nestled on the edge of a dense forest. It was a place of solitude and prayer, where the nuns dedicated their lives to their faith. The towering trees surrounding the abbey seemed to stand as silent sentinels, guarding the secrets within. Their branches intertwined like a protective canopy, sheltering the abbey from the outside world. My grandmother had been sent there to learn from the sisters, to be shaped into a young woman of virtue and piety. The abbey was a world unto itself, a place where time seemed to stand still, and the outside world felt like a distant dream. The tall stone walls of the abbey enclosed a world that was both serene and mysterious, a place where whispers of the past seemed to linger in the air. The nuns moved quietly through the halls, their footsteps barely audible on the cold stone floors. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional rustle of robes or the soft murmur of prayer. The abbey exuded an aura of timelessness, a sanctuary where the worries of the world seemed to fade away. At first, life at the abbey was peaceful. The days were filled with chores, prayers, and lessons. My grandmother found comfort in the routine, in the quiet strength of the sisters who guided her. The mornings began with the sound of the bell, calling everyone to prayer. The afternoons were spent in study and reflection, while the evenings were reserved for quiet contemplation. The rhythm of life at the abbey was soothing, a gentle ebb and flow that mirrored the natural world outside its walls. The changing seasons painted the landscape with hues of green, gold, and white, each bringing its own beauty and challenges. But as the months passed, a strange illness began to spread among the nuns. One by one, they fell ill, their strength waning as the sickness took hold. The village nearby was not spared either. The people there started to disappear, leaving behind empty homes and unanswered questions. The once vibrant village became a ghost town, with only the echoes of its former life remaining. The air seemed to grow colder, the days shorter, as a sense of unease settled over the abbey and its inhabitants. The illness cast a shadow over the community, a reminder of the fragility of life and the mysteries that lay beyond human understanding. With fewer people around, my grandmother found herself with more free time. Her curiosity led her to explore the older parts of the abbey, areas that had been abandoned and forgotten over the years. These parts of the abbey were different, darker, colder, and filled with shadows that seemed to move on their own. The air was thick with the scent of dust and age, and the walls seemed to whisper secrets of the past. It was during one of these explorations that she first heard the whispers. They were faint at first, almost imperceptible, like the distant rustle of leaves in the wind. But as she ventured deeper into the old corridors, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if they were calling out to her from the very stones of the abbey. The whispers seemed to come alive, weaving a tapestry of sound that enveloped her, drawing her further into the labyrinth of forgotten memories. The whispers were soft, almost imperceptible at first. They seemed to come from the walls themselves, a gentle murmur that grew louder the deeper she ventured into the old corridors. She couldn't understand the words, but there was something unsettling about them, a sense of urgency and despair that made her skin crawl. The whispers seemed to beckon her, pulling her deeper into the forgotten corners of the abbey. Despite the fear they instilled in her, my grandmother felt compelled to follow the whispers. They led her to a forgotten chapel, hidden away at the back of the abbey. The chapel was in ruins, its windows shattered, and its altar covered in a thick layer of dust. The air was heavy with the scent of decay, a stark contrast to the vibrant life she had known in the abbey's main halls. But it was there, in the dim light of the chapel, that she saw the mysterious woman for the first time. The woman stood at the far end of the chapel, her figure shrouded in shadows. Her eyes were pure white, devoid of iris or pupil, yet they seemed to see everything. A serene smile played on her lips, a smile that was both comforting and terrifying. My grandmother felt rooted to the spot, unable to look away from the woman's gaze. The woman seemed to be both a part of the shadows and apart from them, an ethereal presence that defied explanation. Her presence was both a comfort and a threat, a paradox that left my grandmother feeling vulnerable yet strangely at peace. As she stood there, frozen in place, the whispers grew louder, filling the chapel with their insistent murmur. The woman began to speak, her voice blending with the whispers, creating a haunting melody that echoed through the room. My grandmother couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clear, an invitation, a warning, a plea. Fear gripped her heart, and she stumbled backward, desperate to escape the chapel and the woman within. But as she turned to flee, the woman's voice cut through the whispers, clear and sharp as a knife. The words she spoke were simple, yet they filled my grandmother with a terror unlike anything she had ever known. She felt the world spin around her, and then everything went black. She awoke to the sound of the morning bell, the sun streaming through her window, casting warm rays across her face. The events of the previous night felt like a dream, but the fear lingered, a constant reminder of what she had seen and heard. She never spoke of the woman or the whispers to anyone, fearing that they would think her mad or worse, that speaking of it would somehow bring the woman back. As time passed, the illness that had plagued the abbey and the village began to fade. The nuns who had fallen ill recovered, and life slowly returned to normal. The village began to stir with life once more, the echoes of laughter and conversation gradually replacing the silence that had settled over it. But my grandmother never forgot the woman in the chapel, her white eyes, and the whispers that had led her there. It was a story she carried with her, a secret she kept hidden until that Saturday afternoon when she shared it with me. Listening to her story, I felt a chill run down my spine. The abbey, the whispers, the mysterious woman, it all seemed too fantastical to be true. Yet, the fear in my grandmother's eyes told me otherwise. It was a fear that had stayed with her for decades, a fear that had shaped her into the woman she was. As I grew older, I often thought about my grandmother's story. I wondered what had caused the illness that swept through the abbey and the village, what the whispers had been trying to say, and who the mysterious woman really was. I imagined the abbey in all its eerie beauty, the forgotten chapel, and the woman who seemed to exist between worlds. The mystery of it all lingered in my mind, a puzzle that begged to be solved. But most of all, I wondered if there were other stories like hers, hidden away in the forgotten corners of the world, waiting to be discovered. The story of the whispers in the abbey became a part of my own story, a reminder of the mysteries that lie just beyond the veil of our understanding. It taught me to listen to the whispers of the world, to pay attention to the shadows that dance at the edge of our vision, and to never underestimate the power of a story told by those who have lived it. The whispers in the abbey were more than just echoes of the past. They were a testament to the unseen forces that shape our lives, a reminder that there is more to the world than meets the eye. They served as a bridge between the known and the unknown, urging me to embrace the mysteries of life with an open heart and a curious mind. The wind screamed through the rigging like the wail of a banshee, each gust crashing against the hull of my old sailboat with such ferocity that it made the timbers groan and creak under the strain. Every gust seemed to possess a life of its own, an entity determined to test the limits of my vessel and my resolve. It was as if the very essence of nature had been unleashed upon us, a force so powerful and unyielding that it seemed intent on tearing apart the very fabric of the world around me. The storm had swept in from the vast Pacific Ocean with almost no warning, transforming the usually serene San Francisco Bay into a roiling cauldron of whitecaps and fury, a turbulent sea that seemed determined to swallow everything in its path. I clung desperately to the wheel, fighting with all my strength to keep the bow pointed into the relentless wind, my knuckles turning white with the effort, my heart pounding fiercely in my chest as though it might burst from the exertion. The storm's fury was unlike anything I had ever experienced, a relentless assault that tested the limits of my endurance and resolve, pushing me to the brink of my physical and mental capabilities. The night was a cacophony of nature's rage, with the wind howling and the rain pouring down in torrents, drenching everything in sight. It was as if the heavens had opened up, unleashing a deluge that threatened to engulf us all, drowning out any semblance of peace or tranquility. Every wave that crashed against the boat sent a shudder through the vessel, and I could feel the power of the storm in every fiber of my being. It felt as if the sea itself had come alive, a monstrous entity intent on claiming my boat and me with it. The darkness was impenetrable, save for the occasional flash of lightning that briefly illuminated the chaos around me, casting eerie shadows that danced and flickered before vanishing into the void. The relentless storm was a force of nature like no other, a testament to the raw power that the ocean could unleash without warning. I felt small and insignificant against the backdrop of this tempest, a mere speck in the vastness of the sea's fury, dwarfed by the immensity of the natural world. The wind tore at my clothes, the rain stung my skin, and the salt water sprayed into my eyes, blurring my vision as I struggled to maintain control. Each moment felt like an eternity as I battled the elements, my muscles aching with the effort, my mind focused solely on survival. It was during this tumultuous night, as the storm raged on and the rain lashed mercilessly against the deck, that I first laid eyes on her. At first, I dismissed it as a trick of the lightning, a fleeting shadow cast by the mast that danced across my vision. But as the next brilliant flash of lightning illuminated the cabin, there she stood, a solitary figure shrouded in gloom, her eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that sent an involuntary chill racing down my spine. Julia Gray. Her name was whispered in hushed tones in the bars and marinas that dotted the bay, a ghost story passed among newcomers like myself. For long years ago, she had vanished without a trace, her body never found, leaving behind a mystery that haunted the community. Some said she had simply run away, while others whispered of dark deeds and foul play. But as I stared into those haunting eyes, I knew without a doubt that this was no mere legend. Her presence was tangible, a cold dread that seeped into my bones and took root. I blinked, and just like that, she was gone, leaving only the lingering echo of her gaze and the relentless storm that continued to batter my boat. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself it was merely the stress, the isolation playing tricks on my mind. Yet deep down, I knew better. Julia had come to me for a reason, and until I uncovered the truth behind her mysterious appearance, there would be no peace on these turbulent waters. In the days that followed, she appeared time and time again. Always silent, always watching, her presence a constant, unsettling reminder of the mysteries that lay hidden beneath the surface of the bay. I sought help, turning to local legends and spiritual guidance, hoping to find some way to rid myself of her specter. But nothing worked, no charm or incantation could dispel her haunting presence. It was only in the dead of night, with the lights extinguished, that she would finally leave me be, retreating into the shadows from whence she came, leaving me to grapple with the darkness alone. Living in perpetual darkness took its toll. The isolation was suffocating, the ever-present fear gnawing at the edges of my sanity. Yet, as I delved deeper into Julia's past, piecing together the fragments of her life, I found myself drawn into a tangled web of secrets and lies. Her story was one of profound tragedy, a life cruelly cut short by violence and betrayal. And as I uncovered the truth, I realized with a growing sense of dread that her fate was intricately intertwined with my own. The final confrontation came on a night as stormy and foreboding as the first. Julia's ghost stood before me, her eyes filled with a sorrow that seemed to transcend time itself. In that moment, I understood what she sought: justice, closure, and perhaps a measure of peace for both of us. With trembling hands, I faced the truth, confronting the darkness within myself and the light that could finally set us both free. As the first light of dawn broke over the bay, the storm subsided, leaving behind a calm that mirrored the newfound peace within my heart. Julia's spirit had found rest at last, and with it, a part of me had been reborn. The old sailboat creaked gently in the morning breeze, a vessel now filled with memories and the promise of new beginnings. And as I set sail into the horizon, I carried with me the lessons of the past and the boundless promise of the open sea, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. The wind continued its relentless assault, the storm's fury unabated, as if nature itself was trying to erase the memory of that night. I held fast to the wheel, my fingers numb from the cold and the strain, as the boat pitched and rolled beneath me. The sea was a living thing, a beast of unimaginable power, and I was at its mercy. But even as the storm raged on, I felt a strange sense of calm, a certainty that I was meant to be here, in this moment, facing whatever lay ahead. As the hours passed, the storm began to abate, the winds dying down to a mere whisper, the waves losing their ferocity. The first light of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a golden glow over the bay, a promise of a new day. The calm that settled over the water mirrored the peace within my heart, a peace that had eluded me for so long. Julia's spirit had found rest, and with it, a part of me had been reborn. The old sailboat creaked gently in the morning breeze, a vessel now filled with memories and the promise of new beginnings. And as I set sail into the horizon, I carried with me the lessons of the past and the boundless promise of the open sea, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. The storm had passed, but the memory of that night lingered, a reminder of the power of nature and the mysteries that lay hidden beneath the surface of the bay. I knew that I would never forget Julia, her story a part of me now, a thread woven into the fabric of my life. And as I sailed into the open sea, I felt a sense of freedom, a release from the burdens of the past, a readiness to embrace whatever the future held. The horizon stretched out before me, a vast expanse of possibility, and I was ready to face it, whatever it might bring. As I sailed further from the bay, the memories of that stormy night remained vivid in my mind, a constant reminder of the encounter that had changed everything. I knew that Julia's story would stay with me, a haunting presence that would never truly fade. Yet, with each passing wave, I felt the weight of the past lifting, replaced by a sense of anticipation for the journey ahead. The sea was vast and unpredictable, but I was ready to navigate its challenges, carrying with me the lessons learned from the ghostly figure who had appeared in my time of need. The open sea stretched endlessly before me, a canvas of endless possibilities, and I was eager to explore its depths. The horizon beckoned, a promise of adventure and discovery, and I was determined to embrace it with open arms. Julia's spirit had found peace, and in doing so, had granted me the freedom to move forward, unburdened by the shadows of the past. As I sailed into the unknown, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, a determination to honor the memory of the woman who had appeared to me in the midst of the storm. With each passing mile, the memories of that fateful night became a part of my journey, a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the power of the unknown. The sea was a place of mystery and wonder, a realm where anything was possible, and I was ready to embrace its challenges with courage and determination. The lessons of the past were etched into my soul, guiding me as I navigated the waters of the future, ready to face whatever lay ahead with an open heart and a steadfast resolve. Each wave that lapped against the hull was a testament to the journey I had undertaken, a journey not just across the physical expanse of the ocean, but through the depths of my own soul. As I ventured further into the open sea, I knew that I was not alone. Julia's presence, though no longer haunting, was now a guiding light, a beacon of hope and redemption that illuminated my path. The horizon stretched out before me, endless and inviting, a vast expanse of opportunities waiting to be seized. I was ready to embrace it all, to chart a course through the unknown with the confidence that comes from having faced the darkest of storms and emerged stronger on the other side. With the lessons of the past firmly in my grasp, I set my sights on the future, ready to navigate the challenges and adventures that lay ahead. The sea was a living entity, its vastness a reminder of the boundless possibilities that awaited me. As I sailed onward, I carried with me the memories of that stormy night, the encounter with Julia that had changed my life forever, and the unshakable belief that I was destined for something greater. The open sea was my canvas, and I was the artist, ready to paint a new chapter in the story of my life, a chapter filled with hope, discovery, and the promise of new beginnings. As I continued to sail onward, the gentle rocking of the boat became a comforting rhythm, a reminder that I was moving forward, leaving behind the chaos and embracing the serenity of the open waters. The horizon stretched out infinitely, a vast expanse of blue that seemed to merge seamlessly with the sky, promising endless opportunities and adventures yet to be discovered. I was ready to embrace it all, to chart a course through the unknown, armed with the wisdom gained from my experiences and the courage to face whatever lay ahead. As I ventured deeper into the open waters, each wave became a chapter of my journey, each gust of wind a whisper of encouragement, propelling me forward into the vast, inviting unknown that lay ahead. I never imagined I would find myself staring into the abyss, yet here I am, precariously perched on the edge of a digital precipice, my eyes glued to the flickering screens that surround me in this dimly lit room. My name is Bill, and I am one of the last watchers, a title that carries with it a heavy burden. My job is to monitor potential apocalyptic scenarios that could unravel the very fabric of our society, a responsibility that weighs heavily on my shoulders. I have always believed that knowledge is power and that my duty is to prevent chaos from taking root in our world before it can blossom into something far more sinister. For years, I have sifted through vast streams of data, meticulously analyzing patterns and filtering through the noise of everyday life to pinpoint genuine threats. The world is an incredibly fragile place, and it is my job to ensure that the delicate balance we all rely on does not tip over the edge into chaos and destruction. But lately, something has shifted, an unsettling change in the atmosphere that I can't quite place. The air feels charged with attention, a sense of impending doom, and the data I am receiving is more alarming than ever before. It all began with a series of strange and disconcerting reports coming from the Midwest. At first, they seemed like isolated incidents, unusual animal behaviors, inexplicable illnesses, and whispers of a contagion spreading through rural communities like wildfire. Initially, I brushed it off as just another scare, the kind of sensationalism that the media loves to latch onto for ratings. However, as the days turned into weeks, the reports grew more frequent and increasingly dire. I could no longer ignore the signs. Something was profoundly wrong. Using drones equipped with advanced sensors, I began monitoring the affected areas, desperate to uncover the truth behind these unsettling reports. The images that streamed back to me were haunting and disturbing. Fields that were once vibrant with life lay barren and desolate, the crops withered and blackened as if scorched by an unseen flame. The towns that had once bustled with activity were now ghostly echoes of their former selves, their streets eerily silent. I could see the remnants of lives interrupted, homes shuttered and abandoned, and it felt as though I was witnessing a slow-motion apocalypse unfold before my very eyes. But it wasn't just the landscape that alarmed me, it was the people, those who remained. They were changed, their very essence altered by the pervasive fear that hung in the air like a thick fog. Their eyes carried a glaze of terror, a primal instinct to survive that had replaced any semblance of normalcy. I watched helplessly as they barricaded themselves in their homes, their lives reduced to whispers and shadows. It was as if a malevolent force had descended upon them, and I was powerless to intervene in their suffering. As I delved deeper into the data, I stumbled upon something that sent a chill down my spine. Genetic sequences, unlike anything I had ever encountered before, began to emerge from the chaos. There were remnants of a biological entity that seemed to feed on fear and despair, a parasitic organism that thrived in the darkness of the human psyche. It was a predator, and humanity was its prey, ensnared in a web of its own making. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that this was not a natural occurrence. The patterns in the data pointed to something deliberate, an orchestrated event designed to unleash this horror upon the world. A knot tightened in my stomach as I traced the origins of this contagion back to a research facility that had been conducting experiments on human behavior. The name of the facility rang a bell in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had seen it before, perhaps in a report or a discussion long forgotten. Late one night, driven by a mix of curiosity and dread, I made the decision to dig deeper into the facility's records. I hacked into their archives, my heart racing as I navigated through layers of security protocols. What I found was beyond comprehension. They had been experimenting with a form of mind control, utilizing a biological agent to manipulate emotions and behaviors in ways that defied ethical boundaries. But something had gone horribly wrong, and the agent had escaped, spreading its tendrils of influence across the nation like a dark plague. I felt a growing sense of urgency wash over me. I had to find the source of this nightmare and put an end to it before it consumed us all. But as I pieced together the fragments of information, I stumbled upon a name that made my blood run cold, my own. It was a project that had been abandoned years ago, one that I had been unwittingly involved in during my early career. The implications were staggering, and I was left grappling with the horrifying possibility that I had played a role in unleashing this horror upon the world. With each passing day, the situation grew more dire. Reports of violence and madness surged as the infected became increasingly aggressive, their minds twisted by the very organism that had taken root within them. I watched in horror as entire communities descended into chaos, the fabric of society unraveling before my eyes. The drones captured footage of people attacking one another, driven by an insatiable hunger for destruction and chaos. It was a nightmare made flesh, and I was powerless to stop it from spiraling further into darkness. But I couldn't give up. I had to find a way to reverse the damage, to reclaim what had been lost before it was too late. I began reaching out to contacts within the scientific community, desperate for answers and solutions. Time was running out, and I could feel the weight of the world pressing down on me like a heavy shroud. Then, one evening, I received a message that changed everything. A whistleblower from the facility had come forward, claiming to have developed a potential antidote. But there was a catch. It required a direct confrontation with the source of the contagion, a risky endeavor that could cost me my life. I hesitated, the fear of the unknown clawing at my resolve, but deep down, I knew I had no choice. I was the only one who could do this, the only one who had the knowledge and the means to confront this darkness. Armed with the knowledge I had gathered, I set out on a perilous journey into the heart of darkness. The facility loomed before me, a monolithic structure that seemed to pulse with malevolence, a monument to human hubris and folly. I could feel the air thickening around me, charged with the remnants of the horrors that had transpired within its walls. As I stepped inside, the fluorescent lights flickered ominously, casting long shadows that danced around me, as if the very walls were alive with the memories of despair. The corridors were eerily silent, the remnants of past experiments littering the ground like forgotten memories. I pressed on, guided by the faint whispers of the whistleblower's instructions echoing in my mind. The deeper I went, the more I could feel the presence of the organism, a palpable energy that seemed to seep from the very walls, wrapping around me like a shroud.
It was as if it were aware of my intrusion, watching, waiting for the moment to strike. Finally, I reached the heart of the facility, a sterile laboratory filled with equipment that hummed with a life of its own. In the center of the room stood a glass chamber, pulsating with a sickly glow that seemed to draw me in. Inside, I could see the organism, a writhing mass of tendrils and dark energy that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. It was both beautiful and terrifying, a testament to the power of creation and destruction intertwined in a grotesque dance. Taking a deep breath, I approached the chamber, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. I had to confront this entity, to face the darkness that had been unleashed upon the world. With trembling hands, I activated the antidote, watching as it filled the chamber with a brilliant light that illuminated the room. The organism recoiled, its tendrils thrashing in protest, but I stood firm, determined to see this through to the bitter end. In that moment, I felt a connection, a fleeting glimpse into the consciousness of the organism. It was a reflection of humanity's darkest fears, a manifestation of our collective despair. I understood then that it wasn't just a monster, it was a mirror, showing us the depths of our own souls, our weaknesses laid bare. The light of the antidote began to envelop it, and I could feel the struggle intensifying, a battle of wills between light and darkness. As the chamber pulsed with energy, I realized that I had to make a choice. I could destroy the organism entirely, but in doing so, I risked losing a part of myself in the process. Or I could try to integrate the antidote, to find a way to coexist with this darkness, to harness its power for good rather than destruction. It was a gamble, but I had come too far to turn back now, too invested in this fight to let fear dictate my actions. With a surge of determination, I reached out, channeling the antidote's energy into the chamber with all my might. The light exploded, engulfing the room in a blinding brilliance that threatened to overwhelm my senses. I felt the tendrils wrap around me, pulling me into the abyss, and for a moment, I was lost in a sea of darkness. But then, I found my footing, my willpower shining through the oppressive gloom, refusing to be extinguished. When the light finally faded, I found myself standing in the lab, the chamber now silent and still. The organism was gone, but I could still feel its presence lingering in the air, a ghostly reminder of the battle I had just fought. I had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, but I knew the battle was far from over. The world outside was still in turmoil, and I had to return to help heal the wounds that had been inflicted upon humanity. As I made my way back through the facility, I felt a sense of purpose ignite within me, a fire that had been rekindled by my confrontation with the darkness. I was no longer just a watcher, I was a guardian, ready to confront the shadows that threatened to consume us all. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges and obstacles, but I was determined to reclaim the light and guide humanity back from the brink of despair, to restore hope where there had been none. When I stepped outside, the sun was setting on the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow over the desolate landscape that lay before me. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders, but also the glimmer of hope for a new beginning. The darkness may have been strong, but I was stronger, fortified by my experiences and the knowledge I had gained. And as long as I stood vigilant, there was still a chance for redemption, a flicker of light in the encroaching shadows. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. In the small, unassuming town where I reside, rumors have always been peculiar and enigmatic. Lately, an unusual phenomenon has taken root, captivating the townsfolk and igniting their imaginations. Each night, in the desolate square at the heart of the town, the atmosphere seems to shimmer with the essence of a film being projected, even though there is no visible screen or projector in sight. The most bizarre aspect of this occurrence is the complete absence of any staff or equipment. The townspeople have dubbed it the Shadow Movie. The film, intriguingly titled Nightmare from Mars, is said to be haunted by the restless spirit of its late producer, Victor Hudson, whose legacy seems to linger in the air. Initially, I paid little heed to these whispers and tales. I merely listened as my neighbors animatedly discussed the haunting images they had witnessed during their evening gatherings, sharing spine-chilling stories of the terrifying creatures and ghostly landscapes that appeared on the invisible screen. Their accounts piqued my curiosity, but as the conversations intensified, my initial intrigue morphed into an overwhelming desire to experience this shadowy film for myself, to uncover the secrets it held. One fateful night, driven by an insatiable curiosity, I resolved to venture into the square. As I approached, the air grew thick with an odd, almost surreal atmosphere, as if I were ensnared in a dream that I could not escape. It was a feeling that defied description, a sense that something unspoken was drawing me closer. I quietly found a secluded corner to sit and waited with bated breath for the fantastical show to commence. As darkness enveloped the square, everything around me fell into an eerie silence. Suddenly, an invisible light sliced through the surrounding darkness, and the movie began to unfold. Ethereal images materialized in the air, haunting scenes of Mars's crimson dunes, bizarre creatures skirting along the edges of the shadows, seemingly in search of something elusive. A wave of unease washed over me, settling deep within my gut, until a voice shattered the silence, sounding eerily like Victor's ghost whispering through the night. "You will become a part of me too." Though the words were cryptic, they sent icy chills racing down my spine, leaving me feeling unsettled. After the film concluded, I hastily departed from the square, but the oppressive feeling lingered, haunting my thoughts long after I had left. Days turned into weeks, and I began to notice an increasing number of peculiar happenings in the town. Whispers of another case began to circulate, involving an abandoned house that had become the center of attention. Several police officers had reported hearing strange, unearthly screams during their investigation, yet they could never pinpoint the source. This house had always been regarded as a forbidden zone in our town. I had heard the ominous rumors before, but now they took on a chilling significance that I could not ignore. One particularly dark and moonless night, I made the decision to explore the abandoned house for myself. It loomed at the edge of town like a dark star, one that had never basked in the warmth of sunlight. Vines twisted and curled around the door, concealing countless secrets within its depths. As I pushed the door open, the creaking sound echoed ominously, serving as a silent warning against what lay ahead. Inside, the scene was one of utter desolation, as if the place had been forsaken for a century, and the air was thick with a strange, musty odor that made my stomach churn. As I ventured deeper into the house, my heart raced with a mix of fear and anticipation. Suddenly, a sharp, blood-curdling scream pierced the stillness, emanating from somewhere below. I hesitated for a fleeting moment, my instincts urging me to turn back, but curiosity propelled me forward. I cautiously descended the steep, rickety stairs, my flashlight illuminating the walls that were covered in unsettling graffiti and dark crimson stains. What I discovered next left me utterly horrified. In the dimly lit basement lay several bodies, the remains of homeless individuals who appeared to have been trapped in this hellish place. Their faces were frozen in expressions of despair and terror, and beside them stood a grotesque piece of experimental equipment. It was a nightmarish contraption, constructed from rusty steel and broken pipes, evoking images of a twisted laboratory. I could almost hear faint whispers brushing against my ears, as if the spirits of the lost were accusing me. The fate of these innocents was somehow intertwined with my own. Upon returning to town, I found it increasingly difficult to shake off those horrifying images that had burned themselves into my memory. Meanwhile, reports of missing homeless individuals began to surface, and hardly anyone seemed to know where they had vanished. Even more unsettling was the rumor that began to circulate about a clown. This clown had become synonymous with the disappearances, and chilling tales emerged, suggesting that he was conducting horrific experiments, seemingly using the homeless as his unwilling subjects. The very thought of it sent a shiver down my spine. I could no longer live in quiet denial. I felt compelled to investigate this enigmatic clown myself. During my search, I stumbled upon a dark alley that appeared to have a complex connection to the clown's existence. Following the shadowy path, I discovered an abandoned laboratory, its entrance shrouded in darkness. As I stepped inside, the acrid smell of chemicals assaulted my senses, and I was immediately reminded of the bodies I had seen, a wave of nausea washing over me. In the dim light of the laboratory, I noticed an open notebook lying on a dusty table. It contained records detailing bizarre experiments and anatomical drawings, along with a chilling name, the Clown of Rebirth. My heart raced as I felt the pieces of a sinister puzzle falling into place. This clown must be inextricably linked to Victor's movie and the growing list of missing homeless individuals. Just as I was engulfed in a whirlwind of fear and disbelief, I heard a low, sinister laugh emanating from behind me. I spun around in a panic to find a raggedly dressed clown standing before me, his face contorted and grotesque beneath the mask, as if I were trapped in a waking nightmare from which I could not escape. "The clown will always bring you joy and fear," he whispered, his voice echoing like a ghostly wail in my ears. I fled the horrifying scene in a blind panic, but that laughter followed me, lingering in the air, mocking my helplessness and despair. As I stumbled away, I felt myself slipping into an endless abyss of darkness. The weight of my experiences became increasingly unbearable. It felt as though the town was cloaked in some malevolent force, a darkness that seeped into every corner of my mind. I began to doubt my sanity, feeling as though I were ensnared in an inescapable fate that I could not comprehend. Ultimately, I resolved to delve into the sewers, where rumors suggested the clown made his lair. Perhaps there, hidden beneath the surface, I could uncover the truth that had eluded me for so long. As I navigated the dark, damp passages, searching and probing for answers, the air was thick with hushed whispers, the clown's whispers, Victor's ghostly whispers. They echoed in my ears, growing louder and more insistent, pushing me deeper into a pit of fear. Just as I felt I might lose consciousness, a soft light caught my eye. It was gentle and radiant, a glimmer of hope amidst the overwhelming despair. I rushed toward the light, only to discover that the laboratory had been rebuilt. This structure was unlike any other in town, glowing with an otherworldly light that seemed to beckon me closer. I stepped inside, my heart pounding, and saw a brand new projector, displaying the very nightmare from Mars I had witnessed in the square. This time, however, words began to materialize on the screen, embrace the cycle, become a part of it. An invisible terror enveloped me, and I realized I had finally uncovered the dark secret that lay hidden within the town. I turned to flee, but there was no sound behind me. I understood that I might not be the only soul trapped in this nightmarish reality, yet I could not grasp the full implications of what it all meant. In this town, the disappearances of the homeless, the legend of the clown, and Victor's ghost, all the horrors had found a home within this twisted experiment. I could no longer escape the vortex of despair. The helplessness and hopelessness that filled my heart would imprison me forever. Now, I wander endlessly through this darkness, becoming a lost clown, a mere shadow of my former self. The shadow movie will play on eternally, and I will be the final act in this chilling story, forever trapped in a cycle of fear and despair. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. When I received the call to become a fire lookout, a rush of excitement coursed through me, mingled with an undercurrent of anxiety that I couldn't quite shake off. The thought of spending months alone in a remote tower, perched high above the sprawling forest, was both thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. I had always been drawn to the beauty of nature, the serenity it offered, but the solitude and strict rules of the job made me feel uneasy. Despite my reservations and the creeping doubts in the back of my mind, I accepted the position, eager for a new adventure that promised to take me far away from the familiar. The day I arrived at the lookout tower was etched in my memory like a vivid painting. The air was crisp and invigorating, and the scent of pine filled my lungs as I climbed the narrow, winding path that led to my new home. The tower loomed above me, a weathered structure standing sentinel over the vast, untamed wilderness. As I stepped inside, the wooden floor creaked beneath my weight, and I felt a strange sense of foreboding wash over me, as if the very walls of the tower held secrets waiting to be uncovered. It was as if I had entered a realm where time stood still, and I was both the observer and the observed. I quickly settled in, setting up my small living space with the essentials, a bed, a desk, and a telescope that would become my constant companion in solitude. The view from the tower was breathtaking, with endless stretches of green stretching to the horizon, a sea of trees that swayed gently in the wind. Yet, as I gazed out at the beauty surrounding me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, as if the forest itself had eyes. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant call of a bird, amplifying my sense of isolation. It wasn't long before I stumbled upon a peculiar list of rules pinned to the wall, each one more unsettling than the last. The rules were simple yet ominous. Do not leave the tower after dark. Do not engage with strangers. Always keep the radio on. Report any unusual sightings immediately. The more I read, the more I felt the weight of isolation pressing down on me like a heavy shroud. These rules were designed to protect me, to keep me safe from the dangers of the wilderness, but they also served to heighten my sense of confinement, reminding me that I was utterly alone in this vast expanse. Days turned into weeks, and I fell into a monotonous routine of scanning the horizon for smoke and monitoring the radio for updates on the weather and any potential fires. The solitude began to gnaw at my sanity, and I found myself talking to the trees, imagining their responses as if they could hear me. I missed human interaction, the sound of laughter, the warmth of companionship that felt so distant now. Yet, despite the loneliness, I was determined to fulfill my duty, to be the vigilant guardian of the forest, even if it meant sacrificing my own comfort. One evening, as the sun dipped below the treetops, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I noticed something unusual in the distance. A flicker of light danced among the trees, drawing my attention like a moth to a flame, and curiosity tugged at me with an irresistible pull. I remembered the rule about not leaving the tower after dark, but the allure of the unknown was too strong to resist. I grabbed my flashlight, my heart racing with a mix of fear and excitement, and made my way down the winding path, each step echoing in the stillness of the forest. As I approached the source of the light, I stumbled upon a clearing where a small campfire crackled merrily, casting a warm glow in the encroaching darkness. To my surprise, I found a stranger sitting by the fire, his face illuminated by the flickering flames. He looked up as I approached, his expression a mixture of surprise and relief, as if he had been waiting for me. "I thought I was the only one out here," he said, his voice warm and inviting, breaking the silence that had become so familiar to me. We exchanged stories, and I learned that he was a hiker who had lost his way in the dense woods. He spoke of the beauty of the forest, the thrill of adventure, and the importance of connection with others. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of joy ignite within me. We shared laughter and stories late into the night, the fire casting flickering shadows around us like playful spirits. But as the hours passed, an unsettling feeling crept into my mind, reminding me of the rules I had been so careful to follow. I remembered the warnings about engaging with strangers, and a chill ran down my spine, creeping into my thoughts like a dark cloud. As dawn broke, I realized with a jolt that I had stayed out far longer than I should have. I hurried back to the tower, my heart pounding in my chest, a sense of dread settling over me like a heavy blanket. I could almost hear the rules echoing in my mind. Do not engage with strangers. What if I had broken a rule that I couldn't undo? The thought gnawed at me, and I felt a tightening in my chest as I climbed the stairs to the lookout, my mind racing with anxiety and regret. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and self-doubt. I kept replaying the encounter in my mind, questioning every detail. Had I imagined the warmth in the stranger's eyes? Was he truly lost, or was he a figment of my isolation, a mirage conjured by my desperate need for connection? I became hyper-aware of my surroundings, convinced that I was being watched by unseen eyes. The forest, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison, its beauty tainted by the shadows of my fears. One night, as I lay in bed, unable to shake off the feeling of unease, I heard a strange noise outside the tower. It was a low whisper, like the rustling of leaves, but more deliberate, as if someone was trying to communicate with me. I sat up, my heart racing, and listened intently, straining to catch the source of the sound. The whisper grew louder, and I felt an overwhelming urge to investigate, to uncover the mystery that lay beyond my door. I grabbed my flashlight and crept down the stairs, the beam of light cutting through the oppressive darkness that surrounded me. As I stepped outside, I was met with an eerie silence that seemed to envelop me. The forest appeared to hold its breath, waiting for something to happen. I called out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" My voice echoed back, swallowed by the night, the sound fading into the void. Just as I was about to turn back, I saw a figure emerge from the shadows, and my heart skipped a beat. It was the stranger, his face obscured in the dim light, a ghostly presence in the night. "Why did you leave?" he asked, his tone urgent, filled with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. "You don't understand what's happening here." Confusion washed over me like a tidal wave. "What do you mean?" I replied, my voice trembling with a mixture of fear and curiosity. He stepped closer, and I could see the desperation in his eyes, a reflection of my own growing panic. "You're trapped in a cycle. You need to break the rules to escape." His words hung in the air, sending a chill down my spine. I felt as if the ground beneath me was shifting, and the very air around us crackled with tension and uncertainty. "What cycle? What rules?" I demanded, but he merely shook his head, his expression filled with a mix of fear and determination that left me feeling even more lost. Before I could ask more, he turned and disappeared into the trees, leaving me standing alone in the darkness, my heart racing with a mix of confusion and dread. The weight of his words lingered in my mind like a ghost, and I felt a growing sense of urgency. I had to understand what was happening, to confront the reality of my situation and the strange forces at play in this isolated wilderness. The following days were a blur of confusion and paranoia. I began to notice strange patterns in my daily routine. The same birds would appear at the same time each day, their songs echoing in the stillness, and the sun seemed to rise and set with an unnatural regularity that sent shivers down my spine. I started to question my own sanity. Was I truly trapped in a time loop, or was it all a figment of my imagination, a trick played by my mind in this desolate place? Determined to uncover the truth, I began to experiment with the rules that had governed my existence in the tower. I ventured out after dark, ignoring the warnings that had been drilled into me since my arrival. Each time I broke a rule, I felt a strange energy surge through me, as if the forest was reacting to my defiance, urging me to push further. But with each act of rebellion, I also felt a growing sense of dread creeping in, a nagging fear that perhaps the stranger was right. What if I was truly trapped in a cycle I couldn't escape? As the days turned into weeks, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. I felt exhilarated and terrified all at once, free yet imprisoned by the very rules I had sought to challenge. I continued to see the stranger in the forest, always just out of reach, as if he were a ghost haunting my every step, a reminder of the choices I had made. I tried to communicate with him, to understand the nature of the cycle and how to break free, but he always eluded me, slipping away like smoke in the wind. One fateful night, as I stood on the tower's balcony, gazing out at the sprawling darkness, I felt an overwhelming urge to confront the truth that had been gnawing at me. I realized that I needed to return to the heart of the experiment, to the very center of this strange reality that had ensnared me. I descended the tower for what felt like the final time, my heart pounding with determination and fear. As I made my way through the forest, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me, cutting through the fog of confusion that had clouded my mind. I was no longer afraid of what lay ahead. I was ready to face whatever challenges awaited me. The trees whispered around me, their voices blending into a symphony of encouragement, urging me to continue on my path. I followed the trail that led to the clearing where I had first met the stranger, feeling an inexplicable pull drawing me closer. When I arrived, I found him waiting by the campfire, a knowing smile on his face that seemed to hold the answers I had been seeking. "You've come back," he said, his voice calm and steady, as if he had been expecting me. "You're ready to break the cycle." I nodded, feeling a sense of purpose swell within me. "What do I need to do?" I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He gestured to the fire, and I felt a wave of warmth envelop me, wrapping around me like a comforting blanket. "You must confront your fears, embrace the unknown. Only then can you escape this cycle." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words settle in my heart like a promise. I stepped closer to the fire, the flames flickering with an intensity that mirrored my emotions, dancing in rhythm with my racing heart. In that moment, I understood. The rules had been my prison, but they had also been my guide through the darkness. I had to let go of the fears that had held me captive for so long. I closed my eyes and allowed the warmth of the fire to wash over me, embracing the uncertainty of what lay ahead, ready to face whatever came next. As I opened my eyes, the world around me shifted in a way I could hardly comprehend. The colors of the forest deepened, becoming more vibrant and alive, and the sounds of nature harmonized into a beautiful melody that resonated within my soul. I felt a sense of liberation, as if the chains that had bound me were finally breaking, shattering the illusion of my confinement. The stranger smiled, and I knew that I had taken the first step toward freedom, a journey that would lead me to discover who I truly was. In that moment, I realized that the true essence of the forest was not just in its beauty, but in its ability to challenge and transform those who dared to enter its depths. I was no longer just a lookout. I was a part of something greater, a cycle of life and rebirth that transcended the boundaries of time and space. With newfound clarity and purpose, I stepped into the unknown, ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that I had the strength to face it all. The fire flickered behind me as I ventured deeper into the forest, ready to break free from the confines of my past. I was no longer afraid, I was alive, and the journey was just beginning, a new chapter unfolding in the story of my life, filled with endless possibilities and the promise of transformation. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I never imagined that my summer job at the quaint little motel in Louisiana would spiral into a horrifying nightmare. The place was small and unassuming, nestled away from the bustling highways and the vibrant life of the nearby town. As a young handyman named Jack, I was just trying to earn some extra cash before heading off to college. The pay was decent, and the work was straightforward enough: cleaning rooms, fixing minor issues, and keeping the establishment tidy. But despite the simplicity of the tasks, there was something deeply unsettling about the motel, something that gnawed at my insides like a persistent itch that I couldn't quite scratch. From the moment I stepped into the dimly lit lobby, I felt an unsettling aura surrounding the place. The air was thick with an unspoken tension, and the walls seemed to whisper secrets, their silent stories echoing in my mind. The manager, a grizzled man named Wayne, was the strict enforcer of the motel's peculiar rules. He was a man of few words, but his presence commanded respect and instilled a sense of fear. The very first thing he told me was to never, under any circumstances, answer the phone for room 119. I chuckled at the absurdity of it, dismissing it as just a silly superstition. However, Wayne's serious demeanor made me hesitate, planting a seed of doubt in my mind. As the days turned into weeks, I settled into the routine of my job. I cleaned rooms, stocked supplies, and occasionally interacted with the guests who came and went. Most of them were friendly enough, but there was always an air of unease surrounding room 119. The door was perpetually closed, and I never once saw the occupant. Wayne would often glance at it with a look of dread, as if it were a cursed object that should be avoided at all costs. The atmosphere around that room was thick with an unshakable sense of foreboding. One particularly eerie night, while I was taking out the trash, the phone rang. I glanced at the clock. It was past midnight, the witching hour when shadows seemed to stretch and twist. My heart raced as I recalled Wayne's warning. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the receiver, caught between fear and curiosity. The ringing continued, relentless and eerie, like the tolling of a death knell. Curiosity gnawed at me, urging me to pick up the phone despite the warning. I took a deep breath, steeling my nerves, and answered. "Hello?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper, trembling with uncertainty. "Help me." The voice on the other end was frantic, a woman's voice filled with desperation and terror. "Please, I'm trapped in room 119. My blood ran cold in my veins. I glanced at the door, the ominous number 119 staring back at me like a malevolent eye, a dark portal to something I couldn't comprehend. "Are you okay? What's happening?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. "I don't have much time. You have to get me out of here. He's coming." The line went dead before I could respond, leaving me in a state of shock and disbelief, my mind racing with fear and confusion. I rushed to find Wayne, my heart pounding and my mind racing with questions. I found him in the break room, sipping a cup of coffee, the steam curling into the air like the ghosts of the past. He looked up, his expression shifting from annoyance to concern as I relayed the chilling call I had just received. "Did you answer it?" he asked, his voice low and urgent, a mixture of fear and anger in his tone. "I had to." She sounded like she was in real trouble. I insisted, my hands trembling uncontrollably. Wayne's face paled, the color draining from it as he realized the gravity of the situation. "You shouldn't have done that, Jack. Room 119 is off limits for a reason. We need to check on her, but we have to be careful." Together, we approached the door, a sense of dread enveloping us like a thick fog. I knocked, my heart racing in my chest. "Hello? Are you in there?" Silence hung heavy in the air, thick and suffocating. Wayne exchanged a worried glance with me before he took a deep breath, steeling himself, and turned the doorknob. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, empty room. The bed was unmade, the sheets twisted and rumpled, and the curtains fluttered slightly in the breeze, as if beckoning us to enter. But there was no sign of the woman, no indication that she had ever been there. "Where is she?" I asked, panic rising in my chest like a tidal wave. Wayne stepped inside, scanning the room with a look of grim determination. "I don't know, but we need to find her. This isn't right. Something is very wrong here." As we searched the room, I noticed something strange about the ice machine in the hallway. It was unusually loud, clattering and banging as if something were trapped inside, begging for release. I felt an inexplicable urge to investigate, a morbid curiosity drawing me closer. "Wayne, come look at this," I called, my voice shaking with a mix of fear and anticipation. We approached the ice machine, and I could see that the door was slightly ajar, the light from the hallway casting an eerie glow inside. Wayne hesitated, his face twisted in apprehension, a mixture of dread and caution. "We shouldn't," but I couldn't resist the pull of curiosity. I pulled the door open, and the sight that met my eyes was horrific. Inside, wedged among the ice cubes, was a bloodied hand, fingers contorted in a silent scream, a gruesome testament to the horror that had unfolded. I stumbled back, my heart racing as the realization hit me like a cold wave. Oh my God! What happened? Is this her? Wayne's face went pale as he stepped back, his eyes wide with terror, reflecting the horror of the moment. We need to get out of here, now. We bolted down the hallway, adrenaline pumping through our veins like wildfire. The motel felt alive, the walls closing in around us, each shadow stretching toward us like grasping fingers. I could hear the distant sound of footsteps echoing behind us, a sinister presence that urged us to run faster, to escape the clutches of whatever dark force was at play. Where do we go? I gasped, my lungs burning with exertion. The fire escape. Wayne shouted, leading me through the back door, urgency in his voice. We stumbled into the cool night air, but our escape felt far from over. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist around us, and I could feel the weight of the motel's secrets pressing down on us like a heavy shroud. We needed to destroy it, to rid ourselves of this nightmare once and for all. Let's burn it down, I suggested, my voice trembling with fear and determination, the idea both terrifying and liberating. Wayne nodded, his face grim and resolute. We'll need gasoline. It's the only way to ensure it's gone for good. With frantic energy, we gathered supplies from the maintenance shed, our hearts racing as we prepared for the reckless act of destruction. The plan was audacious, but desperation fueled our actions, igniting a fire within us that matched the flames we were about to unleash. We poured gasoline around the perimeter of the motel, our hearts pounding as we prepared to ignite the flames that would cleanse this place of its horrors once and for all. As we struck the match, a sense of relief washed over me, mingling with fear. The fire roared to life, engulfing the building in a blaze of orange and red, illuminating the night sky like a beacon of chaos. But as we stood there, watching the flames consume the motel, I felt a chill run down my spine, a creeping dread that something was still lurking in the shadows. Did we really escape? I whispered, doubt creeping into my mind like a thief in the night. Wayne's expression was grim as he turned to me, his eyes dark with uncertainty. I don't know, Jack. But we can't look back now. We have to keep moving. We ran, the heat of the fire warming our backs, but the darkness of the night loomed ahead, an ominous reminder of what we had just unleashed. The sound of sirens echoed in the distance, a reminder that our actions had consequences, that we could not simply erase the horrors we had witnessed. As we fled into the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that the motel's secrets had not been buried with the flames. The woman's voice echoed in my mind, a haunting reminder of the evil that lurked within those walls, whispering promises of terror and despair. In the days that followed, I tried to put the experience behind me, to forget the horrors that had unfolded. I returned home, but the shadows of that night clung to me like a second skin, a constant reminder of the darkness I had encountered. I couldn't forget the horror of room 119 or the woman who had called for help, her voice forever etched in my memory. One night, as I lay in bed, trying to find solace in sleep, I heard a familiar sound, the ringing of a phone. My heart raced as I glanced at my own phone, the screen illuminating the dark room like a beacon of dread. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the screen, paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. Should I answer it? With a deep breath, I steeled myself and picked it up. Hello? I said, my voice trembling, filled with an anxiety that threatened to consume me. Silence greeted me, heavy and oppressive. Then, a whisper, barely audible, slithered through the receiver. Help me. I dropped the phone, my heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. The nightmare was far from over, and I knew deep down that the horrors of room 119 would always be a part of me, a shadow that I could never escape. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I work in a bustling grocery store, a vibrant place that comes alive with the sound of carts rolling, the chatter of customers, and the cicada-like beeping of the checkout scanners echoing throughout the aisles. Each day, I carefully navigate the chaos of long lines filled with impatient shoppers, overflowing baskets brimming with an assortment of groceries, and the occasional meltdown of an irate shopper who seems to have lost all sense of patience. My boss, in all his wisdom and experience, has warned me to keep my head down during peak hours, advising me to avoid engaging in any conversations that could potentially slow down the mad rush of the checkout process. He seemed to possess an uncanny awareness that the grocery business operates on a delicate balance, one that could easily tip into madness if not handled with care and precision. Despite my earnest efforts to adapt to the frenzied pace that defined those busy hours, I often felt a creeping sense of unease lurking just beneath the surface. The regulars, who at first seemed harmless enough, each exhibited their own unique quirks that frequently clashed violently with the backdrop of my daily routine. There was Mr. Henderson, for instance, who would loudly debate the merits of organic apples while stubbornly trying to purchase the cheapest option available, his voice echoing with fervor throughout the store. Then there was Mrs. Ellis, who insisted on sharing her entire family history with me while I scanned her items, barely allowing me a word in edgewise. I tried diligently to manage my stress, counting down the minutes until my shift would finally come to an end, yet no matter how hard I tried, it never quite worked. The anxiety would just not leave me. As weeks turned into months, I began to hear whispers among my coworkers about the famed night shift, which, they claimed, was an entirely different world altogether. A strange sense of curiosity tugged at my insides, and despite my initial reservations and the sinking feeling in my gut, I volunteered to take on the night shifts. I figured that if I could handle the chaos of peak hour madness, surely I could manage the eerie stillness that enveloped the store after dark. Little did I know that my naive enthusiasm would soon fade into a harrowing lesson in terror that would haunt my thoughts long afterward. The first night shift arrived, and as the clock struck 10, I walked into the store, only to be greeted by an unsettling silence that enveloped me like a thick blanket. The flickering neon lights cast elongated shadows across the aisles, their hum resonating in a way that was both strangely comforting yet deeply disconcerting. My confidence began to waver as I stepped into my designated lane, realizing with dawning horror that the usual hustle and bustle had given way to an almost ominous calm. The checkout counters sat vacant, and the aisles appeared eerily deserted, each one stretching out into darkness as though hiding secrets just out of sight. My coworker, Larry, who had been assigned to this shift for years, flashed me a knowing smile as he meticulously stocked the shelves with an odd precision that made me uneasy. "Just stick to the rules," he said, his voice low and almost warningly conspiratorial. "We don't engage much with the night crowd." I nodded, my anxiety rising and bubbling just beneath my surface as I tried to mask it, swallowing hard as I settled into my role. The first few hours passed in relative quietude, punctuated only by the occasional sound of bags rustling as a customer stepped into the store. But as midnight approached, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. It began with a woman named Barbara, who appeared seemingly out of nowhere, her presence shattering the stillness that had temporarily settled over the store. I could hardly breathe as she approached my counter, her face obscured by a hood that cast unsettling shadows over her sharp features. When she finally looked up, I was met with a pair of dark, hollow eyes that seemed to suck in all traces of light surrounding them. Her face was unnaturally pale, the skin stretched tight over her bones, creating a haunting visage that made her appear almost otherworldly. "Do you have any fresh produce?" she asked, her voice resonating eerily in the dim light that flickered fitfully above us. The question itself was simple enough, yet it sent an inexplicable chill racing down my spine. I tried to present her with a smile as I directed her towards the produce aisle, all the while my heart racing in my chest. Somehow, I felt just in that moment that this woman was not merely after apples. There was something far deeper and darker stirring beneath the surface. She wandered off into the aisles, leaving me shaken and thoroughly unsettled. I glanced at Larry, who had shifted his gaze elsewhere, clearly unfazed by her presence. "Oh, Barb's harmless," he said casually, the nonchalance in his tone almost maddening. "She just likes to linger around." I could hardly believe his words. They did little to soothe the storm of unease brewing inside me. The minutes ticked by, growing heavier with each passing second, and it became increasingly difficult to shake off the dread that was coiling tightly around my chest. As if summoned by my earlier thoughts, Barbara returned, her cart now half filled with the fruits that I had just pointed out to her. I attempted to scan her items, but she seemed lost in her own world, staring blankly into the void as if she were searching for something just beyond my comprehension. My breaths came shallow now as I finished ringing her up, her eyes unblinking and fixated on me, almost as though she was daring me to ask another question. "Do you ever wonder about darkness?" she suddenly asked, her voice barely a whisper, as if the words themselves were afraid to fully emerge. My pulse quickened alarmingly, and I forced myself to nod, not trusting my ability to articulate a response. She began to speak of shadows, of places where lost souls wandered in a never-ending search for something they could never find. Her words twisted together until they morphed into an incoherent tapestry of fear and longing. All I could think about was the overwhelming desire to escape the checkout, but her gaze held me in its magnetic grasp, dragging me deeper into the abyss of her unsettling presence. It was only after she left the store, the door chiming shut behind her with an odd sense of finality, that I finally felt a wave of relief wash over me. Larry chuckled softly. "Told you she's harmless. Just keeps to herself." But despite his reassurances, I wasn't convinced. The encounter lingered at the back of my mind like a persistent shadow, weaving itself into the fabric of my night shift experience in ways that I could hardly define. As the night deepened, customers began to trickle in and out, each one more peculiar than the last, as if some cosmic force was at play. One man arrived with a wild, frantic look in his eyes, demanding multiple rolls of duct tape, as if they were the key to solving some unresolved crisis in his life. I couldn't help but cast a sideways glance at Larry, who appeared completely unflustered, handling this odd request with the ease of someone who had seen it all before. The man fixed a pharaoh-like glare on me, and as I fumbled with the tape, my mind raced, processing just how odd he really seemed. He didn't seem nervous at all. Instead, he appeared deeply determined. With every strange interaction that unfolded before me, my anxiety heightened, but simultaneously, my fascination with the night deepened. It felt as if every customer passing through was part of a greater narrative, each stepping into the store with their own hidden stories just waiting to unravel. It was a twisted experience that I struggled to pin down, one rooted in the peculiarities of human behavior that I was beginning to recognize and understand. Eventually, the clock edged toward 3 a.m., and amidst the mounting unease, I could feel the weight of fatigue settling heavily on my eyelids. Just then, the air around me shifted imperceptibly, and I sensed an alarming presence a moment before I turned to face it directly. A tall man stood before me, his face contorted with rage, shouting obscenities that filled the air with a palpable tension. "I've had enough of this place," he screamed, his voice echoing off the aisles. "I've been waiting for hours." I glanced frantically at Larry, who seemed unbothered yet alert, ready to handle the escalating situation as though he had dealt with similar outraged customers countless times before. Words flew back and forth like arrows, and the man's agitation only grew, spilling forth accusations of poor service and disdain for the entire grocery store experience. I felt my heart pounding violently against my ribcage, instincts urging me to retreat, but I found myself locking eyes with this furious customer. "Sir, how can I help you?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly, barely masking the tremors that had begun to course through me. It felt increasingly surreal, standing there in a brightly lit grocery store while chaos threatened to spill over the edges of my composure. "Help me? Help me," he echoed with dark fury, stepping closer to me, his eyes wild and unyielding. I was acutely aware that my very safety seemed to crumble into question, the notion of my own strength fading dangerously at the edges. Whatever he perceived to be wrong, he wasn't going to stop until he felt utterly satisfied. My hands trembled furiously as I managed to ring up the items of another customer quickly, hoping to defuse the situation before it spiraled any further. Larry, seemingly unfazed by the confrontation, stepped forward steadily, placing a calming hand on the man's arm. The soft touch, though simple, seemed to bridge the gap between uncontrollable fury and a moment of understanding. With a few carefully chosen words from my coworker, the man's anger slowly began to wane, his expression shifting from raw rage to a confused contemplation. Finally, he huffed and retreated, storming out of the store with a finality that left behind a silence that felt almost victorious. I let out a long breath, unsure whether I was relieved or still terrified. "Welcome to the night shift," Larry said with a knowing grin, as if this were just another day at the office. As the sun began to rise beyond the horizon, signaling the end of a harrowing night, my shift finally came to a close. I stepped outside, the cool morning air engulfing me as I drove home, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and adrenaline coursing through my veins. The world outside seemed surreal and dreamlike, a stark contrast to the chaos and strangeness I had just left behind in the grocery store. I had survived the night shift, but as I pulled into my driveway, a disconcerting thought struck me: I never wanted to return. The peculiarities of the night, the strange faces, and the unsettling encounters lingered uncomfortably in my mind, reminding me that the grocery store had a life all its own, full of shadows and secrets just waiting to be discovered. The very next day, I returned to my regular hours with a newfound sense of determination, filled with an unyielding resolve to leave the night shifts behind me. The chaos of peak hours now felt strangely comforting in comparison to the creepiness of the night. I knew that my encounters, steeped in the curious darkness of night, would forever remain a part of my story, but some chapters are best left untouched, left to haunt the corners of my memory without ever being revisited. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I never imagined that working at a gas station could be anything more than a mundane job, a mere stopgap in my life. I thought it would be a simple way to make ends meet while I figured out my next steps. But as I settled into my role at the remote gas station on the outskirts of town, I quickly learned that this place was anything but ordinary. The flickering neon sign outside cast an eerie glow over the cracked pavement, illuminating the surrounding darkness in a way that felt both inviting and foreboding. The rusted pumps seemed to whisper secrets of the past, tales of travelers who had come and gone, each with their own story. I thought I was simply filling tanks and ringing up snacks, but what I found was a world brimming with strange stories and unsettling events that would change my perception of reality forever. My boss, Milton, was an enigmatic figure, a man whose very presence seemed to hold the weight of countless stories. He had a weathered face that spoke of years spent in the sun, and his eyes sparkled with a mix of mischief and wisdom, as if he were privy to secrets that the rest of us could only dream of. One rainy evening, as I was closing up the shop, he handed me a tattered notebook that looked like it had seen better days. "Take this," he said, his voice low and serious, carrying an air of urgency. "It'll help you understand the place." I flipped through its pages, filled with cryptic notes and odd instructions that seemed to jump off the page. There were warnings about certain customers, strange occurrences, and advice for dealing with the unexpected that sent shivers down my spine. At first, I thought it was just a quirky collection of thoughts from a man who had seen too much in his time. It seemed like the ramblings of an eccentric, a way for him to cope with the oddities of this job. But as the nights wore on, the notebook became my lifeline, a guide to navigating the strange reality that surrounded me. It documented everything from how to handle a customer who seemed a little too interested in the back room to tips on what to do if the lights flickered at midnight. I chuckled at some of the entries, dismissing them as the whimsical musings of a man who had spent too many nights alone in the dark. But deep down, I felt a chill run down my spine, a sense of foreboding that I couldn't shake. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the gas station transformed into something almost otherworldly. The once familiar sounds of the day faded into an unsettling silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant howl of the wind. The shadows stretched and danced, and I would often find myself staring out into the darkness, wondering what lay beyond the reach of the dim lights. The first time I noticed something was off was when a customer came in one night, drenched from the rain and shivering uncontrollably, his clothes clinging to him like a second skin. He approached the counter, his eyes wide with fear, and I could see the panic etched across his face. "You have to help me," he gasped, his voice trembling. "They're coming for me." I glanced around the gas station, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows, someone or something that could explain the terror in his eyes. "Who's coming?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, to sound more confident than I felt. He shook his head, his breath quickening as he struggled to find the words. "I don't know. They just want something." I looked at the notebook, remembering Milton's warnings about strange visitors and the dangers they could bring. I offered him a cup of coffee, hoping it would calm him down, give him a moment of respite. As he sipped, he suddenly froze, staring out the window with a look of horror. "They're here," he whispered, his voice barely audible. I turned to look, my heart racing as I felt a sense of dread wash over me. In the distance, I saw figures moving, their forms distorted by the rain and darkness, shadows that seemed to flicker and pulse. Panic surged through me as I realized the gravity of the situation. "You need to leave," I urged him, my voice rising in urgency, but he was already backing away, eyes wide with terror. Just as he turned to flee, the lights flickered violently, plunging the station into darkness. I fumbled for the flashlight, my hands shaking uncontrollably. When the lights came back on, the man was gone, leaving only a wet patch on the floor where he had stood, a haunting reminder of his presence. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, a sense of loss and confusion settling in. Was it a trick of the light? Had I imagined the whole thing? I flipped through the notebook, searching for answers, but found only more questions that deepened my unease. The entries about the watchers and the lost made my skin crawl, and I tried to shake off the feeling of dread that clung to me like a shadow. The atmosphere of the gas station had shifted, it felt alive, as if it were watching me, waiting for something to happen, something that I could not control. The following nights brought more strange occurrences, each one more disturbing than the last. I began to notice patterns. Certain customers would arrive at odd hours, their faces obscured by shadows and fear. They would fill their tanks, but never look me in the eye, as if acknowledging my presence would somehow draw their attention to the darkness that followed them. One night, a woman with wild hair and a frantic expression rushed in, clutching a small child to her chest. "Please," she begged, desperation seeping into her voice, "you have to help us. They're after us." My heart sank as I glanced at the notebook, which warned of the seekers, those who would stop at nothing to find what they had lost, driven by an insatiable hunger for something they could never reclaim. I tried to comfort her, offering her a safe place to rest, but she shook her head, eyes darting nervously as if she could feel the darkness closing in. "We can't stay. We have to keep moving." Just as she turned to leave, the lights flickered again, and I felt a cold breeze sweep through the station, chilling me to the bone. The woman hesitated, her resolve wavering, then bolted out the door, dragging the child behind her. I watched helplessly as they disappeared into the night, swallowed by the darkness that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was becoming part of something much larger than myself, something that transcended the ordinary. Each encounter left me with more questions than answers, and the notebook felt like a guide to a hidden world, a map to a place where reality and the supernatural intertwined. I began to see the gas station as a threshold, a place where the ordinary and the extraordinary collided, where the boundaries of the known world blurred. I was no longer just a clerk. I was a guardian of secrets, a witness to the strange and the unknown, and the weight of that responsibility began to settle heavily on my shoulders. One particularly stormy night, as the rain lashed against the windows and the wind howled like a wounded animal, a figure appeared at the door, soaked to the bone. I opened the door cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. It was a man, his face gaunt and pale, eyes sunken deep into their sockets as if he had seen horrors that could not be unseen. "I need gas," he croaked, his voice barely above a whisper, a plea for help that sent chills down my spine. I nodded and filled his tank, but something about him felt wrong, off-kilter. He seemed to be staring past me, lost in a trance, as if he were caught between two worlds. As he paid, I noticed a strange symbol tattooed on his wrist, one that I had seen in the notebook, an ancient sigil associated with those who had vanished, those who had been lost to the darkness. "Are you all right?" I asked, my voice trembling as I tried to gauge his mental state. He looked at me, a flicker of recognition in his eyes, but there was also a deep-seated fear. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered, his words laced with urgency before he stumbled back into the night, leaving me with a sense of foreboding. That night, I couldn't sleep. I pored over the notebook, desperate for clarity, for understanding of what was happening around me. The entries grew darker, detailing encounters with the forsaken and the forgotten, tales of those who had been consumed by their own despair. I felt a growing sense of dread as I realized that the gas station was a crossroads, a place where lost souls sought refuge, and sometimes they never left, becoming part of the very fabric of the place. Days turned into weeks, and I became increasingly aware of the gas station's dual nature. It was a sanctuary for those in need, but also a trap for the unwary, a place where the lines between safety and danger blurred. I began to notice patterns in the customers who came and went, their behaviors revealing the weight of their burdens. Some would linger, their eyes vacant and haunted, while others would rush through, glancing nervously over their shoulders as if expecting something to reach out from the darkness. The more I observed, the more I felt like a spectator in a twisted play, where the lines between reality and the supernatural blurred, and I was left to navigate this treacherous landscape alone. One evening, as I was restocking the shelves, I heard a commotion outside, a cacophony of voices filled with fear and urgency. I rushed to the window and saw a group of people gathered around a car, their faces twisted in terror. I stepped outside, my heart racing as I tried to make sense of the scene unfolding before me. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice cutting through the chaos. A woman turned to me, her eyes wide with terror, and I could see the panic etched across her face. "There's something in the woods," she said, her voice trembling. "We saw it moving." A chill ran down my spine as I recalled the notebook's warnings about creatures that roamed the darkness, beings that thrived in fear and despair. I felt an overwhelming urge to protect the people gathered around me, to shield them from whatever horrors lurked just beyond the tree line. "Stay close," I instructed, trying to sound more confident than I felt, my heart pounding in my chest. We huddled together, scanning the tree line for any sign of movement, any indication that we were not alone. As the minutes stretched into an eternity, I felt the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. I was no longer just an employee, I was the guardian of this place, the one who had to keep the darkness at bay, to stand firm against the encroaching shadows. Just when I thought the night would pass without incident, a shape emerged from the shadows, a creature, tall and gaunt, with eyes that glowed like embers, piercing through the darkness. Gasps filled the air as it stepped into the light, revealing its twisted form, a grotesque reflection of the fears that haunted us all. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I faced the creature, the notebook's advice echoing in my mind like a mantra. I remembered the entry about confronting the unknown with courage, about standing firm against the darkness. "Stay back," I shouted, trying to sound more authoritative than I felt, my voice trembling with the weight of fear. The creature paused, its gaze locking onto mine, and for a moment, time stood still. I could see the pain and longing in its eyes, a reflection of the lost souls that had passed through the gas station, those who had been unable to find their way home. In that moment, I understood. The creature was not just a monster, it was a manifestation of the fears and regrets of those who had come before, a physical embodiment of their pain. I took a step forward, my heart pounding in my chest as I reached out, trying to connect with it. "You don't have to be alone," I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "You can find peace here." The creature hesitated, its form flickering like a flame caught in the wind. Slowly, it began to dissolve into the night, leaving behind an echo of sorrow that resonated within my soul. As the crowd erupted into cheers, relief washed over me like a warm tide. I had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but I knew this was only the beginning of my journey. The gas station was a portal to a world filled with stories, both tragic and beautiful, a place where the past and present intertwined. I realized that my role as the guardian was not just to protect, but to listen, to understand, and to help those who wandered in search of solace, to offer them a moment of respite in their chaotic lives. From that night on, I embraced my position with a newfound purpose, a sense of belonging that filled the void within me. Each customer became a story, a thread woven into the fabric of the gas station's history, and I learned to recognize the signs of those in need, offering them not just fuel for their cars, but also a moment of connection, a chance to share their burdens, to lighten their load, if only for a brief moment. As the seasons changed, so did the stories that unfolded within the gas station. Some nights were quiet, filled with the soft hum of the pumps and the distant sound of the wind. Other nights were filled with laughter and tears, as the stories of those who passed through my doors intertwined. I found solace in the knowledge that I was not alone in this journey, that I was part of something greater than myself. Milton would often stop by, sharing his own tales of the strange and the wondrous, his eyes sparkling with the memories of the past. Together, we forged a bond that transcended the ordinary, united by our shared experiences and the understanding that this place was more than just a gas station. It was a sanctuary for lost souls seeking refuge. I came to understand that the gas station was more than just a place to fill up. It was a sanctuary for lost souls seeking refuge, a place where they could momentarily escape the burdens of their lives. I had become a part of its legacy, a guardian of the stories that echoed through its walls, a witness to the extraordinary lives that intersected within its embrace. And as I stood at the counter, watching the world go by, I knew that I had found my place in this strange and beautiful tapestry of life, woven together by the shared experiences of those who had come before me. In the end, the gas station was not just a job, it was a calling, a purpose that resonated deep within my soul. I embraced my role with open arms, ready to face whatever mysteries the night would bring, to stand guard over the stories that unfolded within its walls. And as the neon sign flickered above, casting its glow over the cracked pavement, I smiled, knowing that I was exactly where I was meant to be, a guardian of the gas station, keeper of its secrets, and witness to the extraordinary stories that unfolded within its embrace, stories that would continue to shape my life in ways I could never have imagined. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I have always felt a magnetic pull towards the enigmatic world of viruses. It has been a lifelong fascination, a never-ending quest for understanding that drives me as a virologist. My days spent in the laboratory were often exhilarating, filled with the thrill that comes from discovery, the joy of pursuing knowledge and unraveling the mysteries of infectious agents. Yet, Despite my experience and passion, nothing could have prepared me for the harrowing ordeal that unfolded when I joined a groundbreaking research team under the leadership of Heather, a brilliant yet enigmatic scientist whose intellect often left me in awe. On a cool autumn morning, as the leaves began their inevitable transformation into hues of gold and crimson, Heather returned from an extensive research expedition in South America. The moment I saw her, I sensed that something was amiss. Her usual calm and confident demeanor had been replaced by an anxious energy that buzzed palpably in the air around her. I welcomed her back with open arms, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something darker lurked beneath her surface. When we convened in the main lab, Heather disclosed that during her journey, she had encountered a new pathogen that purportedly possessed the potential to reshape our understanding of infectious diseases in ways we could scarcely imagine. Despite the glimmer of excitement in her eyes, the tremor in her voice revealed her underlying trepidation, leaving it impossible to ignore. My team, fueled by curiosity and anticipation, was eager to dive headfirst into the investigation. Armed with an elaborate setup of microscopes, petri dishes, and vials, we commenced our experiments without delay. Sample after sample spilled across our lab benches as we sought answers, blissfully unaware of the ominous darkness that was about to unfold around us. As the days rolled on, we stumbled upon something extraordinary yet grotesquely terrifying. We discovered that this virus thrived on proximity, spreading through the simple act of eye contact. Our laboratory, once a sanctuary of scientific exploration, had rapidly transformed into a breeding ground for paranoia and distrust. Initially, the concept was intriguing. The idea that a virus could transmit through mere glances ignited fascinating discussions and debates that left us buzzing with excitement. We hypothesized about the implications, brainstorming practical solutions, and even joking about the ridiculous notion of wearing blindfolds in the lab. Yet, as our research progressed and our understanding deepened, the atmosphere within the lab shifted dramatically. Tension began to mount among us, and we found ourselves retreating involuntarily into a new, grim reality, where every fleeting glance became laden with potential danger that could easily tip the balance from safety to catastrophe. I found myself ensnared in an endless cycle of anxiety. Every interaction, once filled with camaraderie, was now tainted by the ominous possibility of infection lurking just below the surface. I had begun to avoid eye contact at all costs, resorting to communicating through written notes or by turning my back, shielding myself from the piercing gaze of my colleagues. The others began to mirror my behavior. Before long, our once vibrant communication dwindled to awkward exchanges and worried glances. What had been our shared mission, the pursuit of scientific knowledge, was now overshadowed by a silent coup orchestrated by the virus, dismantling the fragile trust that bound our team together. One afternoon, amidst the heavy gloom that had settled over us, Michael, a young researcher known for his unwavering sense of humor, attempted to lighten the oppressive mood. "What if we all wear sunglasses?" he suggested with a half-hearted grin, attempting to inject a semblance of levity into our dire situation. But his joke fell flat, drowned out by the weight of our shared anxiety and dread. We were all acutely aware of our mounting fears, yet we lacked the words to confront the grim reality that we faced together. The once vibrant lab, filled with laughter, collaboration, and the joyous sounds of scientific inquiry, had devolved into a chamber of hushed whispers and anxious glances exchanged between colleagues. We began to hold daily meetings, maintaining carefully averted eyes and ensuring that we kept a safe distance from one another as if the physical space could somehow shield us from the virus lurking in the shadows. In the midst of our efforts, something more insidious was changing within us. Our collective paranoia grew monstrous as we began to suspect one another. Whispers crisscrossed through the lab about who had made eye contact last and who might be infected, perpetuating a cycle of suspicion that consumed us. No one in the lab was spared from the shadow of doubt. The tension reached a boiling point when, one dreaded day, Michael fell ill. It started innocently enough, just a cough, a mere tickle in his throat. But as the hours dragged on, his condition escalated into something far more alarming. We gathered around him, our eyes darting between one another, filled with silent accusations and the unvoiced question of who had been the last to look him in the eye. The heavy weight of the unspoken hung thickly in the air as we collectively watched him deteriorate before our eyes. I longed to reach out, to help him, to offer comfort in his turmoil, but the paralyzing fear of making even the briefest eye contact held me captive, freezing me in place. Days passed with agonizing slowness, and Michael's condition worsened. Soon, other members of the lab began to exhibit symptoms as well, each new case igniting a wildfire of panic within our ranks. We were no longer scientists laboring for the common good. We had become unwilling survivors trapped in a nightmare of our own making, self-imposed prisoners of avoidance and dread. My mind spiraled into a dark abyss filled with questions about morality and responsibility. Had we, in our pursuit of knowledge, opened Pandora's box and unleashed a threat we could no longer contain? Then, it hit me like a cold wave of realization. From the very moment Heather returned from her trip, I had known, deep down, something was fundamentally wrong. What had she brought back with her? What dark secret was concealed in her report? My desire to confront her grew, yet it was a dangerous choice considering the paranoia that had gripped our group. When I finally caught her alone, I was forced to make the fateful decision to stare directly into her eyes in a desperate bid for clarity that felt like walking a tightrope over an abyss. "Did you know?" My voice trembled, laced with fear. "Did you know this could happen? Did you realize the danger this could unleash?" Her expression shifted, a whirlwind of conflicting emotions flashing across her face, and I could see the guilt etched into her features. "I had no idea," she whispered, her eyes darting around like a hunted animal searching for an escape route. "I thought it was just a virus, an interesting specimen." In that moment, the full weight of our situation crashed down upon me. She hadn't just returned with a virus. She had unwittingly triggered a chain reaction of fear and distrust that was now spiraling out of control. I wanted desperately to find solace in the notion that perhaps we could contain the situation, control our reactions, but I could feel the walls of the lab closing in, suffocating me with desperation. As the days dragged on, my resolve to escape solidified into a fierce determination. The thought of breaking free from this suffocating reality possessed me. I envisioned myself sprinting through the sterile hallways, bursting through the locked doors, and emerging into the safety of the outside world, where no one could compel me to make eye contact or be ensnared by the web of fear that had ensnared us in the lab. The exit became my elusive beacon of hope, a glimmer of light in an increasingly dark world. One fateful night, I stood before the doorway to the lab, my heart pounding vigorously in my chest, breaths coming in rapid gasps. This was it. I felt ready to break free from the horror that had become my life. But what awaited me outside? I strained to hear the muffled sounds of my colleagues in the distance. Fear gripped me once more, and hesitation washed over me like a cold wave. I took a hesitant step back, retreating deeper into the shadows of the lab, ensnared once again by the threads of anxiety and doubt. That night would linger like a haunting specter in the corners of my mind. The cries of my colleagues echoed through my thoughts as I paced the lab, ensnared in a vicious cycle of self-imposed isolation and paralyzing dread. I watched their interactions shift, grow more hostile, their eyes filled with accusation and fear, reflecting the turmoil that churned within each of us. I felt as though I was losing not only my colleagues, but also my grip on reality itself, unraveling like a thread pulled from a tightly woven fabric. Weeks bled into a blur of uncertainty. The virus had infected our minds just as insidiously as it had our bodies. The lab, once a vibrant hub of innovative research, had transformed into a ghost of its former self, filled with echoes of laughter that had long since faded into silence. I floated through each day, a mere specter of the virologist I had once been, a phantom haunting the very space I had once filled with purpose. Outside the lab, the world continued to spin on, untouched by the chaos that had enveloped us, blissfully unaware of the dark storm brewing within the walls of our laboratory. And then, at last, came the day when we felt we had reached a breaking point. With dwindling resources and a palpable sense of impending doom, the decision was made that we would resort to quarantine. For those of us still healthy, the reality weighed heavily like a shroud. Each one of us carried the burden of survival, all the while grappling with the question of whether we could still trust one another, as fear engulfed us. What if the virus we feared was merely a manifestation of the distrust that had stricken our hearts? A contagion of the mind that held us captive? In that moment of collective despair, a grim realization washed over me. This, I understood, was the true horror we faced. Not the virus itself, but our crippling inability to connect, to trust one another. I stood before the mirror, my reflection staring back with eyes alight with confusion and fear. No more running. I could sense the truth inching closer, whispering to me that I could no longer hide from the insidious fear that had taken root in my heart. Yet the lab wasn't merely a containment area for the virus, it had morphed into a crucible for the human spirit. We were all bound together by invisible threads, whether we acknowledged it or not. It was time for me to make a choice, a daring leap of faith into the unknown. Summoning my courage, I gathered my team, battling through the hollow dread that enveloped the lab. I needed them to see the urgency in our situation, to recognize that together, we could confront not just the virus, but also the fear that had twisted our shared reality into something unrecognizable. We can't let this divide us, I stated firmly, my voice steady despite the tumultuous emotions churning within me. We need to face this as one cohesive unit, together. Slowly, as if awakening from a collective nightmare, they began to see what I had realized. Eye contact was no longer merely a means of infection. It could be a powerful means of reconnection, a bridge that could span the chasm the virus had created. We needed to reclaim our humanity, to wrestle back our lives and our purpose from the clutches of fear. In the days that followed, we labored side by side, collaborating and crafting innovative solutions to contain the virus while learning to navigate the fragile landscape of renewed trust that emerged among us. As weary as I was from the emotional toll of the previous weeks, I felt a sense of camaraderie blossom, delicate and fragile, yet undeniably present. We now understood the threat that each gaze could pose, yet together we vowed to be vigilant and brave, pushing back against the shadows that had threatened to consume us. The path ahead would not be an easy one. Every glance that passed between us would still bear the weight of countless questions and lingering fears. But instead of building barriers, we began to construct bridges, creaking and swaying yet resilient against the winds of doubt. Together, we stepped out from the deep shadows of fear and anxiety, finally confronting the unseen threat that had plagued us for too long. And so, through trial and triumph, we forged a new understanding, a balance between steadfast vigilance and genuine connection. In a world where a single glance could spell danger and bring chaos, we chose to face that danger together, unified against the darkness that had threatened to envelop us all. The lab, which had once felt like a prison, became a place of healing, understanding, and profound resilience. In the end, Our identities were not defined by the virus, but rather by our unwavering choice to defy it, to trust one another, and to connect deeply in the face of fear that sought to tear us apart. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away.